I had a business education background, but law and working on Capitol Hill, that's not really working in business. So I needed to learn more of that stuff in a day-to-day way. So I think that I was careful to understand that, there's going to be some skepticism when, mommy's boy comes into the company, and, I'm using that language about myself because that's, some people are going to feel that way.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another fabulous episode of Leading with Audacious Confidence. And my guest today is the CEO of Kolbe Corp, David Kolbe. I'm so excited to have him on. I have so many juicy questions to ask. So let me just give you a little bit of his bio, and then we'll jump in and meet David. So David Kolbe, like I said, is the CEO of Kolbe Corp. He's lived and breathed the Kolbe concept from its inception. David's work on Kolbe technology and intellectual properties began when he co-developed the original algorithm for computing Kolbe A index scores. His involvement in the design, development, and use of the Kolbe wisdom gives him great insight into all aspects of this valuable tool, including selection, organizational development, and team building. His current role includes management of operational, financial, technical, and legal efforts. In addition, he conducts seminars, research, and speaks to a broad spectrum of industries. David joined Kolbe Corp after working on Capitol Hill as legislative director for a Texas congressman and as an associate with a law firm of, can you say what that is? Because I don't want to butcher it.
Gamage and Burnham.
Gamage and Burnham. My accent sometimes says things the wrong way, so I want to make sure I get that right. So he earned his law degree from Arizona State University and Bachelor of Science in Economics from the University of Pennsylvania Wharton School. He engaged in his community as a board member, volunteer, and participant in civic groups. David and his wife, Pam, have 4 children. And I think within those 4, you have twins as well, right?
That's right.
Oh, wow. So here we go. Welcome, David Kolbe, to the show.
Great to be here, Alicia. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm excited.
Yeah, this is like a year in the making. Like we talked about this a year ago, and now it's actually happening. So this is great. My first question to you is, you have a very extensive resume here, but what is your philosophy when it comes to leadership?
Wow, that's a big question. Boiling it down, I think a couple of things. One, your role as a leader is not to force everybody to be like you. It's not to try to bend everybody to your will. It's really, I think if you're a great leader, you get the most out of people. And then depending on what you're doing, if you're leading, so for me leading a business, I need to get the most out of people and then channel that in the areas that are going to make the business successful. But that business successful part, frankly, that's almost separate from being a leader. Mm-hmm. Partly because, we're leaders in all kinds of areas of our lives. You mentioned my kids. I'm a leader at home with my kids. I'm a leader in other things that I'm involved in. Sometimes I'm a follower. Honestly, part of being a great leader, I think, is also knowing when to step back and when to let other people come to the forefront. Yeah. So, and I could keep going, but I think those are parts of the key elements that I'll start with anyway.
And when you say the most out of people, getting the most out of them, it's not in the terms of using them till they, expire. It's like,
well, no, I mean, frankly, if that's your mindset, you won't get the most out of people because, and yeah, part of it is, I guess, to me, this is, I know this part of it. I also lead and manage the business, but also lead with a long-term perspective. So yeah, if you want to just think about this week or this month or even this quarter, you can grind people and you can make them work long hours, and that's fine for a quarter. But if you really want that to be sustainable, you can't treat people that way.
Right.
Will come back to bite you. So getting the most out of people, you really need to take a big look at that. You know,
Yeah, clarify
unfortunately,
that for people so they understand that it's not grinding people, it's really helping them understand and expand and grow as an
right,
individual.
right. Yeah, I mean, if you want to get the most out of them, part of that's unlocking the potential that's there. So if you just grind people, you use them up and spit them out, you're not interested in developing their talents because whatever, they're operating, you know what they're doing now, you're fine with that, you're kind of using.
Yeah.
But if you are leading, you've got to develop those people because they start with whatever skills and talents they have, but those can and should grow.
Hmm.
Uh, but if you don't give people the opportunity because you're working them, 16 hours a day, they don't really have any time to develop new skills and talents. You're really missing out.
Right. Yeah. That could be a huge mistake that some will make moving forward. So your name is David Kolbe, and it's by no accident that you that you are the head of Kolbe Corp. Tell everybody what exactly is Kolbe.
Sure. Well, first of all, I have to say, although it's not a coincidence, it's also not what people assume because a lot of times people think, oh, well, you started the company. Actually, my mom started the company almost, well, by the time people are hearing this, it'll be almost exactly 45 years ago in 1975.
Wow.
So I was just a tiny kid. Well, not tiny, but I was pretty little. Let's just put it that way. Um, so Kolbe Corp helps people understand a part of themselves that basically nobody else helps them understand. It's called the cognitive part of the mind. So this concept goes back thousands of years. But Kathy Kolbe, my mom, was the first person to figure out, kind of put understanding around what this cognitive part of the mind is, and very importantly, figure out how to measure it, how to look into people and say, what are your natural inborn instinctive strengths in terms of the way you take action. That's what conation is. So it's not the emotional feeling side of our minds. It's also not the cognitive smarts intelligence side. It's this doing, taking action side of who we are. And we seem to be born with these ingrained takes on how we take action. So we all have a pattern and a style for that. And we help people figure that out and then use that to achieve the things that they care about the most.
So you alluded to some differences between how you feel and how you think. What makes this assessment really stand out?
It stands out because it's literally the only one that measures the cognitive side of the mind. So let me give you a little example because I think the words are fine, but especially because conation is obscure, people don't have an immediate understanding of what it means.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
the smart's the intelligence side of things. You go to school, if you're thinking about leadership, you can take leadership training, you can, learn different skills. So there are intelligence sides to things. You can analyze a situation, using your intelligence, and you can decide this is the right course of action. This is the smart thing to do. But that's different from the way you will go about doing it. So some people, for example, are very, they start with a plan, they're systematic, they're organized. They decide this is the right thing to do. This is the course of action I want to take. Now let's develop a plan and then let's execute that plan, in sequence.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we would call an initiating follow-through person. But there are people on the other end of that spectrum. I happen to be on the other end of that spectrum in terms of the way we deal with systems and structure. When I decide this is the way to go, this is the plan, or this is the way to go, not the plan, I would have somebody else develop maybe a plan. If I'm doing it, I would come up with big picture. I'd say, what are the goals at the end that we want to reach? What are maybe a couple of milestones? There's my plan.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a difference in my cognitive style, my cognitive strengths, but the intelligent side is different. Also, the affective side of our mind, the emotional, our preferences, our interests. So as you think about, let's say we are following a plan and we're trying to get to a goal that we've set out for ourselves. At some point along the way, we might get down. We might get disappointed because we missed a milestone, and some people, they miss a milestone and it really hits them, and they have to stop and they have to regroup. Other people, they miss a milestone and their emotional side is, oh, that's a challenge. I'm not going to be down and sad. I'm going to be angry. I'm going to, kick myself in the butt and make sure that doesn't happen again. But those are the three. It's kind of the thinking, figuring out, well, what is it that we should be doing? The way you approach that task, and then the emotional side is kind of how you react. And also, the motivation side, what do you want to do? Like maybe this is the smart thing to do, but you're not motivated by it. You're just not going to make that effort. That's the emotional side. But the Kolbe piece stands out because we measure this thing that doesn't change, the way you take action. And it looks at 4 what we call action modes and describes a person's strengths in each of those 4 action modes, so that once you understand that, you're better at using those internal strengths to get where you want to go.
Yeah, I look at it too as it's really that why piece. For me, at least, it was that why I do things the way I do it. It like made so much sense when I took my Kolbe, why I do things like this instead of this.
Right.
And why I was frustrated in school for so long, because they didn't do things the way I needed to do it. And they were trying to make me do things in a way that just did not, like, I had trouble trying to do it that way, and it stressed me out. So that was the piece of the puzzle for me that started to make sense when I took action, and then I could be more confident and secure in the action that I took, because now I knew that was how I was wired to actually do things.
Yeah. And, I think that's a pretty common experience that people have with Kolbe. A lot of times people think when you take a personality test, and by the way, I use that because that's how people think of it. Personality is really more that affective, emotional side. But when you take a personality test or some assessment like Kolbe, a lot of times people think it's going to be limiting. And it's like, I don't want to do that. It's going to box me in. But what we see way more often is what you're describing, a sense more of liberation. It's, whoa, this is me. Now I get it. Now I understand why school wasn't such a good fit for me. And, some people, it lets them know, now I understand why school was a great fit for me and I seem to be lost. I need to get back to doing what I was doing then. So there are different experiences that we all have with it. But really, when you understand that, it is part of what gives you, hopefully, audacious confidence to go out and tackle things, because you don't have to doubt. Especially people, well, maybe I won't go too far without letting you ask some more questions, but depending on the Kolbe results that you get, again, we all have our experiences and our reactions. There are times when people doubt themselves, even when they're successful, because they don't know if they can do it again. And Kolbe helps you figure out how you can repeat it. I mentioned sustainability as a leadership. Same thing, leading yourself. How can you drive yourself towards sustainable long-term success?
Yes. And if you have really confident in the action that you took to get that result, and that is your you call it the MO, your modus operandi, then that it's a repeatable process. Say, every time I do it this way, I get great results. So anytime I try to do it somebody else's way, that's when the wheels fall off the bus. So I recently read this paper of a friend of mine who was, she's doing an MBA leadership course at Notre Dame, and they talked about navigating polarities and how there are people with these different viewpoints and ideas, and they're trying to teach them in leadership how to bring everybody kind of to the middle, even if you have these opposite viewpoints. And I was explaining to her that sometimes, from my Kolbe training, it's not so much like these polar opposites are viewpoints, but it's actually the way that people are wired to do things, and it can create those polarities. And it's not necessarily about everybody coming to the middle to agree, but it's about understanding each other and their own viewpoints. What do you see about that?
Well, first of all, I love the fact that they're spending time on it, because unfortunately, I think in our country and probably even the world, we need to spend more time figuring out how we can get people to work together toward a common goal, even when they maybe have their differences. So I think that's awesome. As far as Kolbe and how we apply to that, when you think of these three parts of the mind, when we identify, as you were talking about, yes, there are polarities, there are differences in cognitive strengths. I mentioned just the one in terms of how we approach systems and structure. And, you know, some people really need closure and some people are great with having everything be open-ended. And you're right. For us, it's not about trying to get those two people to operate in the middle. It's really about empowering both of those people to be who they are, be the best at who they are, and appreciating what the other person brings to the table. So, you know, I mentioned myself and you know, I'm an open-ended, not super systematic and planned out person. My wife is at the other end of that spectrum. So I know this is a personal reference, not a business one, but it hits close to home for me, literally. She plans and develop, and it's great because I know when to let her do that kind of stuff, and I understand the goals that are really important to her and the systems in our family life that I shouldn't mess up, even though that's naturally what I do. And messing up systems isn't usually seen as positive, but it can be. And she also understands when I do mess up her systems, number one, I'm not doing it because I don't care, I don't love her. It's not that stuff. It's just that's who I am. Mm-hmm. But she also understands there are times when her plans and systems and structures aren't going to work, or maybe they're already broken and I didn't do it.
Yeah.
I have 4 kids, so the kids might have messed up.
The kids might have done it.
Yeah. But when the kids have done it, it's time for dad to step in. Mm-hmm. You know, I need to step in and say, look, now's the time when the system and the plan isn't going so well, and it's probably not going to get put back in that bottle. So I'll jump in and I'll just make something up.
Right. Because you're an improviser.
Right. I'm an improviser. So it's the combination of both the follow through and then also the quick start, as you're kind of alluding to with the quick, that improvisation. It's the same thing in business. We all need cognitive diversity. We need lots of different kinds of diversity, but in terms of Kolbe Corp and instinctive strengths, if everybody operates just the same way, like if everybody's super structured and planned out, then when something happens like COVID comes around, oh my gosh, where's the system and the plan for operating 100% remote?
Yeah.
In a day and a half, you know, where actually we did it literally kind of in one day almost. Wow. If everybody is just the planning, systematic, structured kind of person, you won't have what you need on staff to deal with
innovate. Yeah, to innovate and create.
To roll, all that kind of stuff. So it's really important. The other thing I want to mention is, as you were describing, because there are these differences, there are these 3 parts of the mind. When you learn the parts that aren't about kind of some of the harder things to work out, like values, some of the emotional side. Look, if one person values money and the other person values, I don't know, respect or something, you can have these things where you just aren't going to agree. Those are harder to deal with, but when you can isolate people who just approach a problem differently, you can say to those 2 people, look, you guys agree on the goal, your values are the same. You just approach it differently, and that's actually a good thing. It does mean you're going to have to be patient with each other. Maybe you need to work separately more often than if you're working together and that's your butting heads. But your differences are really a key to your success. They don't hold you back from success.
Yeah, and you mentioned your personal life, and I did want to just touch on that Kolbe isn't just for business, though.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is part of who you are 24/7. You don't turn it off or change it when you leave the office and go home. So yes, you're going to bring it to your relationships, whether it's your family, your friendships, the volunteer things you're doing. It's always there.
And Kolbe actually has a system for couples and relationships.
Yeah, I actually love it, partly because it was interesting. We were doing a meeting. We had an advisory board, and we were going around the room and asking everybody on the advisory board, the biggest difference that Kolbe has made in their lives, and these were all people who are business clients of ours, and all of them mentioned something in their personal lives. It was something with a child. It was something with their marriage. It was something with a volunteer thing that they were involved in. So the couples, the relationship thing, we call it Takes Two. So takestwo.com. It's not a dating site. It's not about finding somebody. It's about understanding the relationship that you have. So you and your significant other can take your Kolbe A indexes, and then you get a report that says, okay, and here's how the two of you match. So when you have those differences, how do you manage those? When you have similarities, how do you manage that? So a lot of times the similarities can make things more easy and natural between the two of you. So let's not only talk about follow through, let's talk about fact finder. That's another one of the action modes. That's how you gather and share information. So if both of you are researchers and jump into things and dive deep and find out all kinds of information and data, that's great. But maybe you compete on those things. So how do you manage all of that stuff? It really helps. And again, one of the big differences it makes is just understanding the times when, look, this is who my partner is. He or she isn't doing this way to bug me. They aren't doing it because they don't care or don't love me. That's just who they are. So really just the discovery helps a huge amount. But then also I think the practical suggestions, and it's divided up into different areas around household chores, vacations, if we ever get to take vacations these days, personal finances. So great practical advice too.
Excellent. I have so many other questions I want to ask. So I'm trying to gather my own thoughts because I want to throw, I'm a quick start too. So I want to just throw them all out there at you. But I'm going to ask about the biggest mistake that you think you've ever made that was like, oh my gosh, how do I recover from this as a leader? And then did it affect your confidence and how did you recover?
Yeah. I think it was partly a particular incident, but also just something that I really had to learn was the right level of communication with people. So the specific incident where this came to the forefront, unfortunately, we had to let somebody who had been our number one salesperson go. This is a number of years ago. It seemed abrupt to lots of the staff, and people thought we didn't handle it very well, and I got lots of criticism. And one of the main reasons was because we hadn't communicated to other people about what was going on with this person. And yes, we had talked to them and said their performance was an issue, and we had worked with them and tried to improve it. And yeah, there was something that made it somewhat sudden, but the underlying problem was that I kept things too close. Yes, it's absolutely important to value and respect people. And when you give them negative feedback, it's best to do it in private. I'm not saying that I should have given a public dressing down to this person. But I also was very hesitant to share with anybody else, even in leadership, what was going on and what we were trying to do about it. So it was balancing that respect for that person's feelings with also being kind of clear in what I needed to do as a leader, and in communicating that ahead of time in a constructive way. So it's a hard issue. It's not like, oh gosh, I made just this simple mistake and I changed it, because frankly, those aren't I don't think the biggest mistakes. They may look the biggest because they can be very public sometimes, but if they're that easily corrected, it's like, oh, it was a mistake, you fixed it.
Right.
I think the bigger ones are things like this, where it's not that there's one right answer, it's pretty nuanced and you really have to work. And that's something that I've worked at ever since then, is finding the right balance between being open, sharing information more broadly in the company, but also understanding that you can't be, I don't really believe in being a total open book. Again, negative feedback. I'm not the kind of leader that sits in a meeting and when somebody suggests an idea that I don't think is a good idea, I don't just say, that's a terrible idea, I can't believe you wasted our time, go back and try again. Like, okay, that got their attention maybe, but that's probably a little too destructive and has other problems. But again, you have to balance that. And I know there's some leaders who are, they just believe, look, here's me. I'm super direct. I think your idea is bad. I'm going to tell you. If you can't deal with it, then you shouldn't work here.
Oh,
I also believe that that can work. Like if that's the authentic style for that leader, look, it's not mine, but there are people who do very well with that kind of style. It's not a place I would want to work. And I think a lot of other people have that reaction, but so yeah, my mistake was that communication issue, and I'm constantly working on it.
yeah, that's a big one too, to kind of navigate the nuances of how transparent as a leader are you, and how much do you have to hold on to other people's privacy as well.
Yeah. Well, and another, if I could just add a more recent example, and it's not about personnel, but when COVID hit, so yes, our business was significantly affected, like lots and lots of other businesses. So as a leader, part of my job is to make sure that the people on our team don't panic. They don't need to feel like, oh my gosh, the world is falling down around me and I don't know if I'm going to have a job tomorrow. So you want to reassure people, you need to reassure people, but you also need to balance that with, well, how much information do you give? If our revenues are down significantly, if phone calls have stopped, which kind of they did for a little while, back in March and April, how do you balance that? That was something, again, I'm constantly working at it. I think I'm way better than I was earlier in my career, but there's still not one right answer. You need to think about it. You need to get information back. Hey, how did I do? I shared this. And so I was constantly doing that through this, the pandemic situation. Am I communicating the right way? Is it enough? How do you do that?
I feel like a lot of leaders right away had that initial struggle with, well, how much do we really share and how much do we hold on? We don't want people to panic, but we don't even know what's going on either. Right. And trying to reassure people, but still trying to find ways to make it work.
And the not panicking part is more obvious, but I think the other part of, again, if you're leading people and you respect them, you need to give them information and treat them, like grown-ups.
Yeah.
Because they don't need to be panicked. You don't need to overly worry them, but they also need to be given information so that they have time to process it, so that when something does happen, for instance, unfortunately, we haven't had to lay anybody off, but if we did, I don't think it's good leadership to pretend everything is fine, we're going to be great, and then all of a sudden, oh, you have to lay off 10%, 20%, whatever, 50% of your staff. People should have been given a heads up that, hey, we're doing everything we can. Here are the positive sides, but you do need to know that there's a risk. So it's, that's part of the philosophy, I think.
Absolutely. How did you make the transition? Because you were a little boy when your mom started her whole research on this Kolbe method, but then you went off and you did your own thing. Like, when did you come back? How did you come back? How was that? How were you received back into the company?
First of all, I think it's really important that I went away. I know there are people who kind of live in the family business from the time they, graduate college and start working. But for me, it was important to go do other things. So when I came back as general counsel. So I'm a lawyer, as the bio was saying. So I came back as general counsel. I worked on the legal stuff. I started slowly doing more and more things. I had a business education background, but law and working on Capitol Hill, that's not really working in business. So I needed to learn more of that stuff in a day-to-day way. So I think that I was careful to understand that, there's going to be some skepticism when, mommy's boy comes into the company, and, I'm using that language about myself because that's, some people are going to feel that way.
Right.
And that isn't, you don't overcompensate and come in as like, look how smart I am and how great I am. You also don't come in too timid and not doing anything and being meek. I mean, you act appropriately. So the appropriate place for me was running the legal part of the business and then slowly building other stuff. And I think, I'm not the right person to ask about what other people thought because I'm not those other people.
Exactly.
It's worked out okay because I'm still around. It's been, oh, the other part of your question was, how did that happen?
Yeah.
So I came into Colby as a grown-up in 1997. So I was working as an attorney. Kathy Kolbe, AKA Mom, but in a business context, she's always Kathy. So Kathy kind of recruited me. The company had a lot of legal stuff going. It was early in its career, so there were just more legal things that needed to be worked out. We also had some intellectual property issues that we had to deal with former clients who were ripping some things off. So there was a lot of legal work to be done. I was also very interested. I liked being a lawyer, but being in business had kind of a broader set of opportunities for me. So I think that's really why I wanted to move. And this was as the internet era and the .com stuff is just taking off, and the company, in addition to doing personnel assessment, had these internet things going on with Kolbe.com selling indexes. But so it was really interesting. It was a great opportunity.
Awesome. And yeah, when you have family businesses, there can be that tricky part of people who are not in the family and people who are in the family.
Yep.
And I read the book, Business is Business. So trying to navigate all those things can be a really tricky situation as
Yep.
well. So I'm glad it's all working out for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's often rough. And so the book you referenced was written by Kathy and also Amy Brewski, who is my stepsister technically. So sister, and also works in the business. She's the president of the company and I'm the CEO. And she also worked other places before she came into the business. But part of it is it's not always going to be smooth. I mean, maybe it is for some people, but there are bumps along the way.
Yeah.
You asked about mistakes. One of the things that I really had to learn, it was one of those, I think I kind of knew it would be there, but I didn't understand how it would affect working the business, was the different relationship of mother and son and boss and subordinate. And I kind of intellectually knew it, but when my boss did things that I didn't agree with, or said, this is the decision we're going to make, and she's the boss, I understand, well, she's the boss and I'm the subordinate, so what she says goes, but I still react to it like a son reacting to his mother.
Mm-hmm.
And that took me a little while. I think that was a harder transition for me than for her in those earlier years. Was realizing I can't respond the same way in the office that I would respond in a personal situation. It's just not appropriate.
Right.
But those feelings are still there. So you just have to, some of it is make those feelings go away. And some of it is they're never going to go away totally. So you identify that and respond appropriately in the work setting.
Interesting. Well, I don't have a family business, so this is all fascinating to me. Talk to me about how leaders can really leverage and use Kolbe to really make their company and their business, the people that work for them, take their business to another level.
Yep. So, I think it really starts with information being power is one way to put it, or, understanding, having insight into the people you work with and you lead is invaluable. And if there are only 3 parts of the mind, and pretty much everybody knows about and has learned about the other 2, the intelligence and the emotional side, but if there's this 3rd part and you don't even understand it, you're operating at a huge disadvantage, because you may intuitively guess some of this stuff, but Kolbe gives you really quick, clear insight into who your people are, how they operate, and how you can be a better leader for them. There are lots of times when we make assumptions about, well, this is what worked for me, so I'm just going to tell my people, you should do it this way because that's what worked for me. And that can be kids, but it's also people that you're leading at work. When you understand those differences and you understand that not everybody operates the same way you do, and you don't want them to, you can put people in the right roles. You can help people understand how to work better together. So I've been doing it for so long. I kind of don't understand how people operate as leaders without
They don't
understanding.
do, yeah, without this info.
Yeah.
And you said something really important about how people understand this third part of the mind, and trying to gather my thought again because I had two competing thoughts.
Yep.
So how people understand that cognitive part of the mind and use it to put people in the right roles and everything else. What do you say to people that say, well, I've taken these assessments before and they really don't, it's like a snapshot in time. It doesn't
Right.
tell me moving forward how this person is going to be. What do you say about Colby in that
Right.
situation?
Well, we've done retest studies on Kolbe, and it's a very stable trait. So most people don't change more than kind of plus or minus 1 unit. And we've done that over up to 20 years. So whether you're taking the test 6 months apart or 20 years apart, it's really quite stable. So it's not just a snapshot in time. It really is something that you can count on that lasts. And that is a big difference. But the other thing I'll say honestly is, look, the Kolbe index is not a cure for everything. And I think sometimes the disappointment that people have with assessments, whichever assessment it is they're kind of over promising when they hear what it's going to do. So Kolbe doesn't answer every problem. It doesn't solve everything. It doesn't, not everything gets back to this, but it's really helpful a lot of the times. And, again, like your reaction, we have so many clients who, when they get their own result, they say, oh yeah, now I get it. I think it's also different because Kathy, who developed the instrument, she's a business person first. She's not a PhD who spent her life in academia and came up with theories and concepts that are great in and of themselves. She did that, but she applied them to a business setting. For her, it was all about, okay, but how do these things get used in real life?
Mm-hmm.
So we've really focused our entire history on how can we take this information and make it practical, make it something you can take action on rather than just sit there and go, okay, well, that's nice to know.
Yeah.
Now I'll stick it in my drawer and never look at it again.
Now what? You mentioned a little while ago about negative perceptions of, whether you systems and processes or disorganized, this perception of being disorganized because you are the type that will break systems and processes.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because I know when people get their results, it's on a scale from 1 to 10.
Yep.
Let's talk about that 1 to 3 as a strength and not a weakness, because some people immediately perceive it as a weakness. So let's talk about, first of all, what is that 1 to 3 and why it's a strength?
Sure. So all results in each of the 4 modes describe your strength in terms of the way you operate in that action mode. So there is no better or worse score. It's not like an IQ test or an SAT test where you want to score at the top. You just want to find out what your score is on the Kolbe index. So that 1 to 3 in each of the 4 modes, what we call the react zone. It's all about reacting to situations. So we'll stick for right now with the systems and structure, the follow through. Mm-hmm. My take on it, because I am in that 1 to 3, is I don't initiate action by creating systems and structure and using that energy, but I will react by finding shortcuts, by being adaptable, by being open-ended. And with all of the 4 action modes, what we typically see is people who have a score in that react zone, the 1 to 3, that is usually seen as a weakness. It's something that you should work on. So, it's really obvious in the systems and structure side because it's, going back to grade school, I remember I was taught, every year the teacher had their thing of, okay, when you're turning something in, you have to write your name and the class period and then my name at the top right-hand corner.
And the date. Don't forget the date.
Oh, the date. See, I'm still messing it up, Alicia. I can't believe you caught me. Yeah, so I would turn in homework and it wouldn't be there. And the teacher would say, you get a 0. I'm like, well, that is so unfair. I did it. You didn't even read it. And they're like, you know what? I told you if it's not there, you don't get credit. Mm-hmm. And look, I mean, that's maybe a little much, but they're also teaching little kids a lesson that there are some things that you just have to do. I'm a 2 and follow through. I still have to file my taxes on time. The government doesn't say, oh, it's okay, David, you're a counteract follow through. No, no, no. I just have to get it done.
Yeah.
But the strength part of it, so I'll get back to the example I used with my wife. It's easy to see if it's just the two of us, if I'm breaking her systems and messing up her plans, that can be super frustrating for her. But she sees it as a strength more when the kids mess it up and I can come in and help that situation where she doesn't have to be frustrated by all that. Now it's up to me to use it as a strength. It's up to me to engage that. You know, if I'm just sitting back and saying, whatever, honey, you had your plan. I don't care if it's broken. I'm going to watch the game. Well, then I'm not a very good supportive husband because that's when my talents are needed.
Right.
But those, in each of those four, because you don't initiate action in them, I think that's why it's seen that way. So let me mention a couple of the others. So Quick Start, which you've mentioned, a 1 to 3 in Quick Start is all about stabilizing. It's finding what has worked well and sticking with it. But a lot of people see that as, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? You always say no to my new ideas, or why don't you just,
Take
just
a risk already.
Yeah,
just go for it.
Go for it. Yeah, and that there are a lot of those messages. Well, those people need to be recognized for the strength they bring. Like in business, you do need somebody putting brakes on, even if in the end you move forward. I work with a client who's a 10 Quick Start. So he is the most like ideas coming out constantly. He will come back from lunch and he will tell his team, oh, I'm going to start a new business. Here's what we're going to be doing. But what his team knows, because they all use Colby, is that's how he starts. And they need to understand that doesn't mean we race off this afternoon and we invest $1 million in starting a new business. It means we wait till tomorrow morning and at least maybe that idea is gone. It means not saying no to him when he's brainstorming, but he knows that those people on his team that do stabilize those preventive or counteract quick starts, he needs to listen to them. So when he has 10 ideas, 9 of them are pretty, well, probably 5 of them are bad, 4 of them are marginal, and 1 of them is awesome.
Yeah.
If he didn't listen to the people saying no to things, he'd spend way too much time and energy on the not so great ideas. Because he knows that about himself and his team, he's able to see that as a strength rather than a weakness. And it's really important that we all do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because one of the things with the low follow through too, that react follow through is this idea that you're disorganized. You're always disorganized. But when someone who is like that, they typically know, it may seem disorganized to you, but they typically know where everything is that they need. So it's just their own system. It's not like a system that I wonder if the Dewey Decimal System was created by a counteract follow through.
No, that's too organized. That's gotta be an initiating follow through.
But it makes no sense to anybody. Probably because
it may not be a good system.
It may not be a good system, but it is a system.
It is a system. Yeah, as opposed to me, like I would just, I don't know.
Throw books on the shelf and just say, hey, find what you're looking for.
Yeah, and it might change. But.
So I love that. And talk just a brief second about how your cognitive strengths really help you with your mental energy, understanding your cognitive strengths.
Yeah, it helps you understand what it is, for one thing, so you can understand. And again, you need to be realistic. So my example with having to pay taxes on time, there are times when you're going to have to do things that are outside of your wheelhouse. They're not your cognitive strength necessarily, but you've got to do it. But when you understand that, you can be smart about the way you approach it. So some of our advice is, when you're doing those things that go against the grain for you, set a smaller time chunk aside. Hey, you're going to do it for half an hour, but then you're going to stop and you're going to move on to something else. Do it earlier in the day when you're not burnt out yet. If you try to do it when you're fried, you just won't be able to do it. When you're working with your natural instincts, your cognitive instincts, you can actually recharge even though you're working. People who are able to work and work and work and work and work, they're usually kind of in that flow state, and that's part of that flow state is working with their strengths rather than against them. So, don't interrupt your flow state. If you're already in it, don't interrupt it by then doing something that's really not a good fit. But maybe before you're in it, do those other things you've got to, the things that don't fit well, get
Like
them
eat the
done
frog.
early. Yeah, exactly. And then move on, and you will recharge by working, which, seems counterintuitive, but honestly, when you love what you're doing, it doesn't feel like work.
Absolutely. That's why I love doing these podcasts.
Yeah.
So my final question, because I can't believe how quickly this time went by, but my final question to you is, you have 4 children, and how are they planning to go into the family business? And what are you teaching them about leadership and their own confidence stepping into that?
So their ages, I have a senior in college, a sophomore in college, and my twins are juniors in high school. I have told all of them there is not a job for you at Kolbe Corp. And they say, come on, Dad, what are you talking about? It's a family business and you didn't start it, so obviously there's a place for you. And I said, yeah, but I did 2 other careers before I came back to the business. So I don't know if they're not planning to work in the family business. A couple of them, I think their interests definitely lie elsewhere. A couple of them, they might be interested in coming to the family business. But I will not just encourage, I will force them to work elsewhere before they come into the business, if that even ever happens. Mm-hmm. And wait, what was the second part of your question?
It was like, what do you teach them about leadership and their own confidence? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow, that's such a big one. I think it's understand that there are great things about you. Be true to yourself, and that's a hard thing, especially, I still have 3 teenagers. One of my college kids is still a teenager. That's something they have to grow into. There are doubts along the way, and, insecurities. But part of it's also, those things will happen. I think a lot of people hesitate to be a leader because they see their own flaws. And unfortunately, I think especially earlier, a lot of people who rise up early into leadership positions, it's because they're kind of arrogant and they aren't willing to look inside. Because a lot of those people see the flaws and they see shortcomings and think, well, I can't be a leader because there's this part about me that isn't just perfect.
Right.
That's okay. Great leaders aren't perfect either. They just deal with that. They're realistic about it. They move forward. I'm a huge believer in, bravery isn't about not being afraid. It's about how you handle being afraid. And the same thing with leadership. It's not a matter of being perfect every time from the get-go with all of your decisions. It's about how do you deal with it when you make a bad choice, when you fall flat on your face, when there are big challenges, even if it's not your fault. When there are big challenges, that's when you need to step up as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
I was. No, go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to say, understanding them from young, knowing their Kolbe strengths probably helps them also know that they're great problem solvers, because they know how to rely on those strengths to solve problems. And that's what.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. They've definitely been brought up with that understanding. We try not to overdo it and make everything about that, but it's a huge part of, understanding who you are and how you're going to be successful.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Thank you so much for having me, though.
Well, I enjoyed this tremendously, and there's so much more I know we could talk about. We could talk for hours about this, because you love Kolbe. I'm loving Kolbe too. And I will see you at KolbeCon coming up.
Yes, KolbeCon. We'll see each other virtually again.
Virtually, yeah. Too bad I can't be in Arizona, but we'll see each other virtually. Well, thank you so much for making this happen.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Great to talk with you.
All right, take care. Audacious confidence is the unshakable belief in yourself that's so brave and so bold that you step into what's possible for yourself, despite your feelings, fears, or failures. I encourage you to follow, subscribe, like, and share this out with your friends. To learn more about our guests, check out some additional episodes. Go to aliciacouri.com/leading with audacious confidence. Until next time, this is Alicia Couri saying, live your life bold, brave, and step out with audacious confidence. Till next time.